Hello, everyone. Welcome to our Spiritual Spotlight series. Today, I am joined by Jim Marshall. He is the discoverer and hitherto unknown natural phenomenon which greatly aid in the understanding of people, from which he has constructed a revolutionary practical philosophical system and published it in the book Septemics, which is Septemics is the Hierarchies of Human Phenomena. The data in this book is vital for everyone to help you achieve your goals faster and easier by explaining what might otherwise seem inexplicable or random. So, welcome so much to this Spiritual Spotlight series, Jim. That was a mouthful, and Septemics is a completely new thing to me. So let me just ask you this. So, your work as a discoverer of Septemics, the hierarchies of human phenomenon, promises a deeper understanding of people and their experiences. Could you maybe share a glimpse or of one of these? Actually, why don't we go back? How did you discover this, and how did you stumble upon this? And like you said before we started, that this is a brand new system, that you have discovered and that you have developed. So tell us
Right.
about that.
Okay. Well, it's kind of a long story, but when you hear the origin, it explains a lot of what it is. The story really begins when I was accepted into engineering school at age 16.
Mm.
Now, of course, when I entered, I thought I was going to be engineering physical things like electrons and airfoils and motors and such. But by the time I had my bachelor's degree, I had decided that I wanted to engineer the human psyche because it is the area of greatest unknown. It is the area that gives us the greatest difficulty. And frankly, we are failing miserably in that area. 95% of the problems that people have in industrialized society are because they don't understand people. That's why they get into marriages that wind up in divorce. That's why we elect idiots to run our country. That's why you have bankruptcies and all kinds of terrible things happen because we don't understand people. And this book solves that issue in a way that the average person can easily access. So, to make a long story short, I had a long career as a human development engineer using engineering principles on individual clients, hundreds of different types of clients for many thousands of hours. Now, as I was doing this, I started to notice, incidentally, that my clients would improve in ways that were predictable to me. I never told this to anyone, but I made notes. And as the decades rolled by, I came to realize that the client would be at a specific level on a specific scale that I had already observed from working with so many people.
Oh, wow.
So, needless to say, this only made me better at what I did.
Of course.
So, I never told this to anybody, but I made notes. And by 1995, I had about 32 scales of varying lengths that I had simply discovered empirically. There's no theory of septemics. Right. This was all direct observation. Now, there was one scale in particular that by then I absolutely knew worked, was correct. And I realized one day while pondering a problematic client that there was a seventh level to that scale. And it was obvious to me where to insert it. And when I inserted that level into the sixth level scale, the scale manifested mathematically. Now, I have to understand, I took 26 semesters of math and loved every minute of it. So I have a very deep appreciation of math in everything.
Of course.
I see math in philosophy. I see math in religion. I see math in biology. I see it everywhere. And so when I saw this, I said, whoa, this is natural law. Because anything that has mathematics embedded in it is natural law. For example, the Fibonacci sequence. So I said, I discovered something. And when the mathematics of it jumped out at me, it went from being a line, a scale is a line, to a plane. In other words, there was a whole body of data. So then I said, wait a minute. I wonder how many of these other scales that I had of varying lengths are actually 7-level scales that had not been developed all the way because I wasn't developing anything. I was just helping my clients in making notes.
Right.
So knowing what I was looking for, I studied all these other scales, and in a short period of time, each of them went to 7. And as it went to 7, it manifested mathematically.
Mm-hmm.
So in a short period of time, I had about 32 scales that all had mathematics embedded in them.
Right.
And I said, wait a minute, I've discovered something here. So I said, then my next logical step was, wait a minute, I can go from helping people by the hundreds, which is what I had been doing as a human development engineer, to helping people by the millions if I put this in a book and get it out to people in a way that they can digest. So I said, okay, I have to write this book. So the first draft was completed in December of 95. I sent it to colleagues of mine, all of whom had graduate degrees, and they all loved it. They had different responses, but very positive responses. Right. So this told me that this was exactly what I thought it was. I spent the next 25 years of my life working on this. Wow. Because you have to realize, first I had to discover the phenomena. Right. Most of which was done by 95, although I did find 3 more scales while I was writing the book. Then I had to use this data to craft a workable philosophic system. Now you have to realize that as an engineer, I'm only interested in facts and results. Okay, opinions and beliefs are irrelevant to engineering. So it took 20 years to engineer this thing. Then the most time-consuming part was to express this in a way that would make sense to the average person. Right. And I know I succeeded at that because I've been seeing people use this material now for 27 and a half years. People get it. Right. I was able to write this in a way with a lot of effort and diligence, write it in a way that the average person looks at it and says, ah, yeah, I get this. Now, the reason people get it is because it's natural law. It's like when you look at the periodic table, it doesn't take long to say, oh, yeah, I see, this is cool, you know? Or the Pythagorean theorem, same thing. You look at it and it's not obscure. It's right there because it's natural law. It makes perfect sense. And that is what this material is. People tell me this continuously. Yeah, this makes sense. So they get it. And because they get it, they can use it. Right. So I crafted these scales to wrap around the reader. So the experience you have when you read this book, it's like putting on glasses and looking in the mirror. You see yourself better. So you can also use it to view other people putting on glasses and looking at other people. Right. So this is really 35 different pathways to success because there are 35 scales. So that's how I got it. Now, if I were to tell you the names of the 35 scales, you would see the scope of this and the general subject matter. May I do that?
Yeah, of course.
Okay. So these are the individual scales, meaning they apply primarily to individuals. The scale of basic purposes, the scale of personal influence, the scale of choice, the scale of permeation, the scale of thought, the scale of identity, the scale of evaluation, the scale of motivation, the scale of control, the scale of stopping, the scale of scholarship, the scale of literacy, the scale of human ability, the scale of memory, the scale of spiritual identity, the scale of mental deletion, the scale of aberration, the scale of physical fitness, the scale of justification, the scale of belief, the scale of equanimity, the scale of attack, the scale of conflict, and the scale of reaction. And the group scales are the scale of relationships, the scale of life spheres, the scale of government, the scale of civilization, the scale of survival, the scale of management, the scale of exchange, the scale of communication, the scale of allegiance, the scale of sexuality, and the scale of politics. Each one of these scales has the potential to dramatically improve the life of the reader. It depends on the person, what his situation is, how he perceives it. But a person can, now some of these are so powerful that individually you could focus on this one scale for the rest of your life and just keep improving and improving and improving and improving.
Do you find that some of the readers, when they do kind of delve into this book, they focus on one scale at a time?
Well, the way the book is written, it shows you the scale, and then there's a chapter about it, which tells you all about it.
Yeah.
Then you go to the next. So some scales apply better to certain situations. You see, this is very individual.
Mm-hmm.
There's no one size fits all. So it's like if you go to the store to buy a dress, right? There's 10,000 dresses. Well, you have some parameters, your size, and within that, even beyond size specifics about what parts of you are big, what parts of you are small, what colors you look good in, so it's just, at the end of it, you leave with something you're happy with and $300 less. So that's how this works.
Right.
Okay. So any person can resolve any problem, difficulty, or situation using these scales.
Mm-hmm.
It's not obscure.
No, when you were reading the scales, it's like, oh, that's a good one. Oh, that's a good one. Oh, that's a good one. Like you said,
Right.
like you can definitely, anyone, any human can identify with any scale and dive into it. And like you said, accelerate and improve their lives.
Right. And let me just qualify what you just said. If you can read English reasonably well and you want to improve yourself or others, this book is for you.
Yeah.
Now, there are about 1.5 billion people who can speak English. I estimate about 1 billion of them can read well enough to read this book. But there are many people who have no interest in improving themselves or others. Psychopaths, sociopaths, narcissists, corrupt people, professional criminals, serial murderers, war criminals. There's all kinds of horrible people.
Yeah.
They have no interest. They would never read this book. And even if they did read it, they wouldn't understand it. But even if they did understand it, they would never apply it because it's contrary to their way of life.
Right.
They're not going around trying to uplift people the way I have been my whole life. Mm-hmm. They want to clear out your bank account and steal your wife, So I calculate that about 50% of the human race is interested in improving oneself and others. So you can use this to improve yourself, your husband, your daughter, your son, your mother, your boss, your employees, and so forth.
Absolutely. Can you perhaps share a glimpse of, maybe one of these scales that had the most significant implications for personal growth? And do you have an example of maybe one of your clients that have read this and like, wow, that was a dramatic transformation?
Well, I could do that, but I don't think that's really a good use of our time.
Okay.
A better thing is for me to tell you how this helps people.
Sure. Of course.
How this can benefit you.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Because that's what people want to know.
Yeah.
Okay. So I have had a lifetime of helping people, and I've been very successful at it. I wrote this book to help people. Each of these 35 scales provides the reader with an infallible way of determining the salutariness or beneficialness of any group, individual, or activity. If the group, individual, or activity moves persons up these scales, it's beneficial or positive. If it moves them down, it's detrimental or negative. More importantly, finding out what level you or another person is at on any scale is by itself enlightening and beneficial. Every time you spot a level, either for yourself or another, you have a realization. You say, oh, now I see what's going on with Joe, because it's explicated with specificity in the book what this phenomena is. So you get it detailed. So you really understand yourself or another person when you find the level. Of course, you have to find it correctly, and the book tells you how to do that. Now, finally, once you know the actual level of the person or group, you can improve that person by moving them up one level at a time. Now, one of the axioms of this subject is you can never skip a level. So if you're at level 4, you can either go to 3 or 5. And you have to realize that every person is at some level on every scale.
Right.
So this data is just sitting there waiting for you. Now, you can ignore this data, but it's much smarter to take advantage of it. It does not cost a lot to buy the book. And I wrote this in such a way that once you get the book, you don't need other things, except maybe a dictionary, but I would say that about every book in the world. So you don't need to take a course, you don't need to hire a facilitator, you don't need to join a religion or anything like that. It's just you and the book. So I wrote it so that it works. And you can just go forward and, yeah, well, that's subject to a couple of caveats. How diligently the person studies it is a factor. How good a student the person is, how literate the person is, how motivated the person is to make this work for him. And also, if the more insight a person has in that particular area from among 35 areas, the easier it is for him to understand that scale. You see, the reason a person is at or near the top of a scale is because he's insightful in that area. And the reason a person is at or near the bottom of a scale is because he lacks insight in that area.
Right.
So some people are high on other scales and low on other scales. Most of us are like that. So when a person is low on a scale, that's going to tell you his insight in that area is not as good, so he's going to have more difficulty understanding it. But the good news is using this generally improves your insight. So the more you use this, the more insight you have, and that facilitates your ability to use the other scales because you're now more insightful.
And would you say with the ability of being more insightful, because like you said in the beginning, that a lot of humans don't know how to communicate with each other. And that's why we have so many issues with politics and the world and relationships and everything, because we misinterpret a lot of communication, either nonverbal or verbal. Would you say by people becoming more insightful that they're able to communicate more effectively with one another?
Well, first of all, as I mentioned, there is a scale of communication.
Right.
That is an earth-shaking scale. You can just take that one scale and spend the rest of your life honing your ability to communicate. And once you become a master of communication, you will have a power that most people do not have. You know, Ronald Reagan was called the great communicator. He won the greatest landslide in American history in 1984 when he won 49 states. Okay? That's how he did it. It wasn't just Republicans that loved him. Democrats loved him. Independents loved him. Libertarians loved him. And it's because of his communication skills. Now, his communication skills existed long before he ran for office in anything.
Right.
You can go back and listen to speeches that he gave in the early 60s, and he was a master communicator. So that's only one aspect of it. That's 1/35 of the power of this.
Gotcha.
So it's not just that people can't communicate, it's that they don't understand. They look at it and they go, duh. You know, they don't get it. So let me tell you something that happens, which is the opposite vector. A person will look at a scale, right? And he's not thinking of, let's say, his mother-in-law, for example, right? And he gets down to level 5 and he says, wait a minute, this is my mother-in-law. She's exactly like this. This explains her behavior. And that happens to people over and over and over. You're not even thinking about the person, and it explains it so clearly that you say, this is my cousin Fred. He's just like this. Every time that happens, your understanding of that person has improved, and consequently, your ability to deal with the person improves. You can handle them better. And it's not just communicating, it's understanding that. So it's knowing, do I want this person around me or do I not? So I'll give you an example. Let's say you have a couple and they're talking about getting married. Wouldn't it be smart for that guy to figure out why that woman wants to marry him? Wouldn't that be a good thing to know?
Yes.
Okay, so there's a scale of motivation. There are only 7 basic human motivations, and the thousands of others are subsets of these. So he pays attention to what she says and what she does, and he studies the chapter. So maybe he determines that her motivation is that she loves him. That's the highest motivation of all, level one.
Mhm.
But maybe he determines that the reason she wants to marry him is that he drives a Maserati, he owns a 60-foot yacht, he lives in a $5 million condo, and he flies his own Learjet. See, that's a different motivation.
Yeah.
That's a money motivation.
Mhm.
Now, for some guys, if he finds out that the woman is a gold digger, he might say, I'm done. Okay? Now, if he finds out that she loves him, he might say, okay, let's get married.
Mhm.
Now, either way, he's going to be happy because it's the truth.
Right.
So when you find a level, whether it's a high level or a low level, you always have a positive benefit
Mhm.
because your understanding was just enhanced. The light bulb goes on over your head. It's a positive experience. So it's not like the guy is bummed out because he found out that his girlfriend is a gold digger. That's not what happens. The guy says, oh, now I see. Because you see, once you get it, it retrogrades, explains what's been going on. You see, you can say, this was here all the time. I just didn't have the specific data to nail it down.
Right.
Now, there are plenty of rich, unattractive, elderly men who are willing to marry a 25-year-old gold digger. I'm sure you've seen this. There's many of them around, right? The girl gets a Corvette, a diamond ring, a pearl necklace, a fur coat, and a credit card. And the guy gets a 25-year-old wife.
Mhm.
So they're both happy. So for that guy, see, it might work.
Mhm.
So again, this is all very specific. That is the beauty of this. You can look into it and use these phenomena to resolve your specific situation.
Right.
Now, the key here is the gradient, because these 7 levels are the gradient. It's like there is a ladder that takes you up to the roof in these 7 steps.
Mhm.
So when you find your level, you then focus on the next level up and nothing else in that
Right.
context. So many people fail because they're going for the wrong level. So
Takes it one level at a time.
let's say you're at level 5, okay? Your target is level 4. You can get to level 4.
Mhm.
You will not be able to get to level 1, 2, or 3. It's too steep a gradient.
Gotcha.
You can't take a guy who's a couch potato and make him an Olympic athlete. There are too many intervening levels,
Right.
right? You have to get him from being a couch potato to being a normal person. Then from there, you can get him to being an amateur athlete. You see? So that is how, and this is good news because the main problem that people have in dealing with their situations is that they don't know the gradient.
Right.
That's
Right.
why they hire trainers and so forth, and go to acupuncturists
Mhm.
and go to facilitators. All the people who came to me as human development engineer, all of them
Mhm.
resolved issues and problems right in front of me. And the reason for that is I would pick up the person at the level he was at, and I would help him to move up to the next level.
Right.
It wasn't anything coming from me. It was just asking the right question. And he would be able to get there. See, he would say, oh, now I see. Now I see what's going on. This woman is a boppity 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 bop. I don't want to have anything to do with her. Or it could be, oh, now I see the problem in the relationship. It's not her problem. It's my problem. You see, whatever it is.
Right.
So either way, he is going to be happy. So this book is a treasure trove of epiphanies.
Well, even just the way that you explained, moving a couch potato to, Olympic athlete, like that's an unrealistic goal. And so many of us are, when let's say just for wanting to get into shape, I'm gonna work out every day for 17 hours a day and this and that. But the way you just explained it, it's like, oh my goodness, I want to see where I'm at the scale and how can I move on the scale.
Exactly.
And make it meaningful, and like you said, to really achieve the goals that you really want to achieve.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. You have to realize that you can only go to the next level up.
Right.
And if you don't deal with it, you can fail and go down to the next level below. Okay, so this is, each of these 35 scales is a pathway to success in that dynamic.
Right.
Now, the other thing I have to tell you is there are general scales and specific scales. There are more specific scales than general scales. What a specific scale means is it only has meaning in a context. Like we used the example a minute ago about a guy determining the motivation of his fiance.
Right.
Right? So you can use that scale thousands and thousands of times. You can say, what is my motivation toward my wife? What is my motivation toward my son? What is my motivation toward my mother? What is my motivation toward my next door neighbor? And every time you find it, your mind is clarified on that issue. Or you can say, what is my boss's motivation toward me? What is my coworker's motivation toward me? See, it's the reverse vector.
Right, right.
And then you're understanding those people. You see, well, of course he doesn't do X, Y, and Z because he doesn't have that motivation.
Right.
So if you take that little vignette I just gave you, right, and blow it up 1 billion times in every direction, you get what this is about. Until you die, there's no limit to how you can use this book.
Yeah, it sounds like, honestly, a handbook. Like, okay,
right,
this is what's going on, and I need some insight. And where am I at, and where do I want to go?
Right, right. So I want to say one sentence that tells you why this is significant. The data in this book are vital for every human being and can help you to achieve your goals faster and easier by explaining what might otherwise seem to be inexplicable or random. Now, you sort of said that before. We got it a little crooked, but that's exactly what this is about. And let me tell you what I mean by that, okay? Because this is very specific. If someone were to invite you to a rendezvous, you would certainly expect them to tell you the time, the date, the location, and possibly also how to get there. Needless to say, it's very difficult to get someplace if you don't know where you are, where you're going, and how to get there. Now, this sounds idiotic, but most people do this regularly. Many people do this continuously. They just go in circles and never get anywhere. Now, this book solves that across 35 axes. So you find the scale that fits your situation. You find your level. That tells you where you are. And your target is the next level up. There is no exception. Maybe what you want is to be at level 3. But if you're at level 5, you have to go through level 4 first. Targeting level 3 is self-defeating. Okay, so this is a gradient for life. This is how you get there across 35 axes. Now, you have to realize that every scale is unique. Right. You cannot infer anything about scale A by studying scale B. And that's good news because that enables this to span the spectrum of human experience. So you can analyze something by one scale and analyze the same situation by a completely different scale. You're just looking at it from another point of view. And then you can use a third scale and you're looking at it from a third. So you get a depth of understanding. And you figure out what's really going on here. For example, if you want, you could do a complete septemic analysis of a person where you could find where that person is on every scale. And by the time you finish that, you have a complete understanding of this person. You know what he's going to do before he does it. And this tells you how you want to interact. For example, we talked before about the scale of motivation. Money is level 4, okay? If you're hiring a guy to sell cars for you at your dealership, you want a guy who's money motivated.
True.
You want him to sell as many cars as he can sell. You're not bringing him in there because you love him. You see? So that's good. But on the other hand, if you're looking for a mate, you might not want somebody who's money motivated.
Mm-hmm.
You see, you might want someone who has a higher motivation.
Right.
So this gets you to select what person for what situation.
Mm-hmm.
So you might have one guy that is good for one thing and bad for another thing.
Yeah.
So you put him in the good thing. And I'll give you a real life example. Bill Clinton, very intelligent man, was a Rhodes Scholar, was a very successful president, was very popular when he left office after being reelected. Okay. Mm-hmm. The last man ever to sign a balanced budget in the United States. Now, you could say that the Republicans forced him to do that, and there's some truth to that, but he was smart enough to give the people what they wanted, which is how you get reelected and how you stay popular, you see? Mm-hmm. So we're talking about a smart man here, okay? If I wanted to discuss politics, and I could pick anyone in the world, he would be on my short list. I've listened to him speak. He's very smart in his field. Mm-hmm. Okay, equally well known is the fact that he's a serial abuser of women.
Yes.
This is no secret. Mm-hmm. Okay, he had all kinds of women suing him for abusing them. He had women come out and state publicly on video that he raped them. Okay, you can look this up and watch what these people say. So this is the same guy. So if I had a sister or a daughter, mm-hmm. I would say, don't go out with Bill Clinton. It doesn't mean I hate him.
Right.
Okay. I have high regard for his expertise. Mm-hmm. But so it's a perfect example of a person who fits well in one area, doesn't fit well in another area.
Right. That's a really good point. So let me ask you just maybe one more question.
Yes.
So what message or piece of advice would you like to convey to those that are maybe eager to kind of delve into this material?
Well, I would invite them to go to my website, septemics.com, mm-hmm. where you can see what many readers have said about it, yep. what many journalists have written about it. You can read sections of the book itself. Mm-hmm. You can read the reviews. And there is a pre-recorded introduction to Septemics by me, which you can listen to. And it explains it in a way that a new person can understand. If you go through those 5 steps, you're probably going to want to buy the book because you're going to say, yeah.
So I have one question. Oh, let's
yes.
go back to the cover.
Yes.
I love this little star. Does that have a meaning to it, or?
Yes, that is the Septemics logo.
I love the logo.
The logo tells you the subject. If you look at it, you'll see there are 7 points in that star for the 7 levels. Each point is a different color.
Yes.
But between them, they make a spectrum.
Yes.
And so that's what you're getting. For each of these 35 areas, you're getting the full spectrum of how that area manifests mm-hmm. with human beings. So the logo tells you a lot about what this is. And again, it's sort of like a geometric representation, which is part of the mathematical underpinning of the subject. Now, you don't have to like math or know math to read the book. I went out of my way to not make it like that. There are a few places where it's beneficial to the person to explain some of the mathematics of it. Mm-hmm. But I made it in a way that even people who dislike math can get it easily, without knowing anything previous.
Right. Well, Jim, I want to thank you so much for coming on the Spiritual Spotlight series. You are a pleasure to speak with. I recommend that everyone go to septemics.com, and I'll make sure to link that in the interview. And I want to say thank you again, Jim, for coming on today.
Thanks. It was a pleasure.